By the late 1960s, Hollywood was at a crossroads. The old system of censorship under the Hays Code had collapsed, leaving studios and filmmakers free, but also under scrutiny. Parents, religious groups, and lawmakers were concerned about what audiences, especially children, were seeing on screen. Enter Jack Valenti and the Motion Picture Association of America, who introduced a bold new approach. Instead of banning films, they would guide audiences with ratings. This system would change not only what films could show, but how studios marketed them, how theaters enforced them, and even how movies were edited. In this episode, we'll explore the origins of the MPAA ratings, how they worked, and why they became such a powerful tool for both audiences and the film industry. In 1966, a former presidential aide stepped into Hollywood at a moment of crisis. Jack Valenti, fresh from the White House of Lyndon B. Johnson, became the new president of the Motion Picture Association of America. What he inherited was a system that was clearly breaking down. The Hays Code no longer reflected what filmmakers wanted to create or what audiences were willing to see. Movies were being released without the code seal, foreign films with adult themes were drawing crowds, and court rulings had affirmed that films were protected by the First Amendment. Hollywood wasn't just bending the rules anymore, it was ignoring them. Valenti recognized something crucial. The industry could no longer survive by telling artists what they were not allowed to show. The era of strict censorship was over. But at the same time, there was still pressure from parents, religious groups, and lawmakers who feared that movies were becoming too explicit. If the studios did nothing, the federal government might step in and regulate content directly. So Valenti proposed a radical shift in philosophy. Instead of censoring films before release, the industry would inform audiences about what a movie contained. The responsibility would move away from the studios and toward viewers, especially parents. This would not be a system of prohibition, but of guidance. It was a careful compromise. Filmmakers could push boundaries without being cut off from theaters, and parents could make informed decisions without demanding outright bans. In 1968, Valenti introduced the MPAA rating system, replacing moral enforcement with consumer information. Hollywood hadn't become less controversial, it had simply changed the way it handled controversy. When the rating system was introduced in 1968, it wasn't celebrated as a perfect solution. It was accepted as the least bad option. Hollywood was caught between two powerful forces pulling in opposite directions. On one side were filmmakers and studios who wanted creative freedom after decades under the Hays Code. On the other were parents' groups, religious organizations, and politicians who feared that movies were becoming too graphic, too sexual, and too violent for the general public. Something had to give. The new system proposed by the Motion Picture Association of America offered a middle ground. Instead of banning content outright, the ratings would classify it. This meant the industry could avoid direct government censorship while still appearing responsible to concerned audiences. It was, in many ways, a strategic move to keep control within Hollywood rather than risk outside regulation. For filmmakers, the compromise meant they could depict adult themes without having to water them down to meet an outdated moral code. They didn't have to remove scenes or rewrite scripts simply to receive a seal of approval. Instead, they accepted that their work might be labeled for certain audiences. A film could be intense, controversial, or provocative, and still be shown in theaters. For parents, the ratings acted as a warning label. They didn't stop movies from existing, but they offered guidance about what children should or should not see. This shifted the responsibility from the industry to the family. Rather than Hollywood deciding what was moral, parents could decide what was appropriate for their own households. The rating system wasn't about agreeing on what content was acceptable. It was about agreeing that people would disagree, and building a system that allowed that disagreement to coexist without shutting the industry down. One of the most important philosophical shifts in 1968 was the move from restriction to guidance. Under the old Hays Code, the system was built on prohibition. Certain things simply could not be shown on screen. Crime could not appear to pay. Sexual relationships had to be implied, never explicit. Language, violence, and even the way married couples shared a bed were tightly controlled. The industry operated under a long list of don'ts, and films that violated those rules risked being denied distribution altogether. The new rating system introduced by the Motion Picture Association of America flipped that idea on its head. Instead of asking, "Is this allowed?" the question became, "Who is this appropriate for?" That difference may sound subtle, but it completely changed how movies were made and marketed. Restriction assumes that there is one standard of morality that must apply to everyone. Guidance assumes that audiences are different, families are different, and people should be able to make their own choices. Under restriction, the industry acted as a gatekeeper, deciding what no one should see. Under guidance, the industry acted more like an information provider, telling viewers what a film contains and letting them decide whether to watch it. This shift also changed the role of parents. During the Hays Code era, parents didn't need to worry about content because the studios had already filtered it. With ratings, the responsibility moved into the home. A movie rated R wasn't banned, it simply came with the expectation that adults would decide whether a child could attend. For filmmakers, this meant creative freedom. For audiences, it meant informed choice. And for Hollywood, it meant survival. By replacing moral policing with consumer guidance, the industry found a way to acknowledge controversy without trying to erase it. When the rating system launched in 1968, it introduced 4 letters that quickly became part of the movie-going vocabulary: G, M, R, and X. These categories were meant to give audiences a snapshot of what kind of content a film contained, without banning the film outright. G stood for general audiences, meaning the film was considered suitable for all ages. A clear example is The Love Bug, a lighthearted Disney story with no material likely to trouble parents. A G rating told families they could attend together without hesitation. M stood for mature audiences, suggesting parental discretion. These films explored more serious ideas or situations that might confuse or unsettle younger children. The 1968 version of Romeo and Juliet received an M rating for its mild violence and themes of sexuality. It wasn't inappropriate, but it wasn't aimed squarely at kids. R stood for restricted, meaning viewers under 16 needed a parent or guardian present. Easy Rider is a strong example. Its drug use and violence marked it as adult-oriented, but still accessible with supervision. X meant no one under 16 admitted under any circumstances. Midnight Cowboy famously carried this rating for its frank depiction of prostitution, sexuality, and urban desperation. At the time, X simply indicated that a film was strictly for adults. These letters didn't pass judgment on a movie's artistry. They prepared audiences for what they were about to see. As the new rating system settled into Hollywood, it quickly became clear that 4 letters were not enough to capture the growing range of movies being made. Filmmakers were pushing boundaries in new ways, audiences were changing, and parents were asking for more precise guidance. Over time, the system evolved, not by abandoning its philosophy, but by refining it. The first adjustment came when the M rating proved confusing. Many parents assumed mature meant adults only, when really it meant parental discretion. So M was replaced with PG, for parental guidance. A film like Jaws carried a PG rating despite its intense shark attacks and suspenseful terror. Parents soon realized that PG did not necessarily mean gentle, only that children could attend with caution. But the real turning point came in the 1980s, when certain PG films felt far more intense than families expected. 2 movies in particular sparked public conversation: Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, with its heart-ripping ritual scene, and Gremlins, where mischievous creatures caused chaotic, sometimes violent destruction. Parents argued that these films were too frightening for young children, but not quite deserving of an R rating. In response, the Motion Picture Association of America introduced a new category in 1984, PG-13. This rating signaled that a film might be inappropriate for children under 13, creating a middle ground between PG and R. One of the first major films to carry this label was Red Dawn, whose wartime violence helped define what PG-13 would mean. Meanwhile, the X rating had developed an unintended reputation. Because the rating was never trademarked, adult film distributors began using X, and even multiple X's, to market pornography. As a result, serious films for adults were stigmatized by association. To solve this, the rating was replaced in 1990 with NC-17, meaning no children 17 and under. Henry and June became the first film released with the new designation. These changes didn't rewrite the system's purpose. They sharpened it, giving audiences more nuanced signals about what they were about to see. Once the MPAA ratings were in place, their effectiveness relied on more than just labels. It depended on the theaters actually enforcing them. For the first time, the movie-going experience included an element of self-regulation by theater owners and staff. Without their cooperation, the ratings would have been little more than printed letters on a poster. Enforcement was straightforward in theory. For an R-rated film, theaters were supposed to check IDs and ensure that anyone under 16, later under 17, was accompanied by a parent or guardian. For NC-17 films, no one under 17 was allowed, period. In practice, enforcement varied wildly from theater to theater. Some chains implemented strict ID checks, often asking teenagers to show proof of age before purchasing tickets or entering the auditorium. Others were more lax, letting younger audiences slip in without question. The responsibility also extended to staff training. Ushers and ticket sellers had to understand the meaning of each rating and the rules surrounding it. Posters and lobby cards reminded patrons of the restrictions, but the theater still needed to actively uphold them. A failure to do so could create public backlash, especially if a child were seen watching content considered inappropriate. Interestingly, enforcement wasn't just about law or policy, it also became a marketing tool. By strictly enforcing ratings, theaters signaled to parents that they were taking content seriously, which built trust with their core audience. Some theaters even scheduled family-friendly films during the daytime and reserved evening showings for R or NC-17 titles, using ratings as a way to manage audience demographics. At the same time, the MPAA relied on theaters as partners in their voluntary system. Unlike government censorship, there were no fines or legal penalties for failing to enforce ratings. Compliance was largely driven by industry norms and the desire to avoid controversy. In this way, theaters became gatekeepers, not of content itself, but of who could see it. Their cooperation allowed the rating system to function as intended, giving adults freedom while guiding parents and protecting their children. The rise of home video in the 1980s and 1990s added a whole new layer to the influence of MPAA ratings. Suddenly, movies weren't just seen in theaters, they were being rented, bought, and watched repeatedly in living rooms across the country. This shift changed how studios thought about ratings, because audiences now included children who could sneak a VHS from the shelf, not just kids trying to buy a theater ticket. Home video distributors relied heavily on ratings as a guide for parents. A PG or PG-13 label on a VHS cover immediately signaled whether a movie was appropriate for children or teenagers. Parents shopping in a video store could make quick decisions without needing to know every plot detail. For example, E.T. the Extraterrestrial carried a PG rating, reassuring families that the film was safe for younger viewers while still appealing to older children and adults. On the other hand, an R-rated film like The Terminator was clearly marked, warning parents that the intense violence and mature themes were meant for adult audiences. The availability of film at home also meant that ratings could influence purchase decisions and marketing strategies. Studios often emphasized the rating on the VHS box to align with their target demographic. A PG-13 action movie could attract teenage viewers, while an NC-17 or R title might appeal to adult collectors seeking edgier content. Ratings became even more significant because home video made enforcement harder. Unlike theaters, where staff could check IDs, parents had to police access themselves. The rating acted as both a warning and a guideline, shaping family viewing habits and influencing what films parents allowed into the home. In this way, the MPAA ratings extended their power beyond the big screen. They didn't just guide theater attendance, they became a tool for navigating the growing world of home entertainment, helping families decide what was appropriate while giving studios a framework to market their films effectively. One of the less obvious but incredibly powerful effects of the MPAA rating system was the marketing advantage it gave to studios. Before ratings, films were often limited by the Hays Code, and content that might attract older audiences had to be watered down or risk being denied a seal of approval. Once the rating system was in place, studios could openly signal who a film was meant for, and use that to their advantage. For example, an R rating could be marketed as a badge of edginess. Studios realized that teenagers and young adults often saw the rating as a challenge or a draw, signaling that a film was exciting, daring, or adult-oriented. Films like Saturday Night Fever and Alien benefited from this kind of marketing, with studios highlighting their mature themes to attract audiences seeking intensity or sophistication. A rating could effectively become a selling point, giving the impression that a film was pushing boundaries in ways that earlier movies under the Hays Code never could. The PG and later PG-13 ratings also offered marketing clarity. A PG-13 label told parents that a movie was geared towards older children and teenagers, helping studios target specific demographics. For instance, most superhero movies were promoted as thrilling but accessible to teenagers, which made it easier to appeal to that age group without scaring off parents. Ratings also allowed studios to better plan advertising campaigns. Movie posters, trailers, and merchandise could emphasize the intended audience, letting marketing strategies align with the film's content. An adult comedy, for example, could lean into its R rating in trailers, while a family film could emphasize a G or PG rating to reassure parents. In short, the MPAA ratings became a tool for studios, not just a regulatory system. By signaling who should or shouldn't see a film, ratings gave marketers a way to shape audience expectations, target demographics, and even create buzz, turning what might have seemed like a limitation into a strategic advantage. Over time, MPAA ratings evolved from a simple guide for parents into a full-blown business strategy for studios. Filmmakers and marketing teams quickly realized that a film's rating could directly affect box office performance, audience demographics, and even merchandise sales. The label a movie carried was no longer just information. It was a strategic decision with financial implications. For example, a PG-13 rating could expand a movie's audience without alienating adults. Jurassic Park benefited from this strategy. Its thrilling dinosaur attacks and suspenseful scenes were intense enough to attract teens and adults, but not so graphic as to require an R rating. This allowed the studio to market the film to a broader audience, maximizing ticket sales and cross-promotional opportunities with toys, books, and theme park tie-ins. Similarly, an R rating could be used deliberately to attract older audiences seeking edgier content. Films like Pulp Fiction embraced their R rating as a badge of sophistication and adult appeal, making it clear to viewers that this was not a movie for children. In some cases, studios even adjusted the content during editing to hit a particular rating that would align with marketing goals, ensuring the film reached its ideal demographic. Ratings also influenced release strategies. PG-13 movies were often scheduled for weekend matinees and family-friendly time slots, while R-rated films were targeted for evening showings or limited releases aimed at adult audiences. Marketing campaigns highlighted the rating, shaping public perception and controlling expectations before the film even opened. In essence, ratings became a business tool as much as a guidance system. Studios learned to navigate the spectrum of ratings strategically, using them to optimize audience reach, control messaging, and maximize revenue. What started as a compromise between filmmakers and concerned parents had become a core part of how Hollywood made and sold movies, demonstrating that in the modern industry, content and commerce were inseparably linked. The MPAA rating system was more than just a list of letters on a poster. It reshaped Hollywood from top to bottom. By replacing censorship with guidance, it gave filmmakers creative freedom, gave parents a tool to make informed choices, and gave studios a way to strategically reach audiences. Over the decades, it evolved, influenced home video, shaped marketing strategies, and even set a model for international film classification. The rating system showed that a compromise between art, commerce, and audience responsibility could not only work, it could thrive. In the next episode, we'll explore the controversies and effectiveness of the rating system.